So, Ollie, first of all, a terrific workshop presentation, and in general, just LEGO Foundation support for the overall event, but your session earlier. And just to bring you back as the initiative leads for the global program at the LEGO Foundation, you've been kind enough to help walk us through sort of a general insights and reflections section for us to use to conclude the symposium. So, Ollie, I'd like to turn it over to you and look forward to your insights.
Great, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Tony. And I just kind of really wanted to start off by saying thank you to everybody that's been involved in the various conference presentations over the last three days. As Tony says, I'm just going to sort of try and pull together some sort of closing remarks here of things that I've seen. I've not been in all of the sessions because many of them have run parallel, but I have been able to look at some of the insights and the aha moments. I've been following the hashtag on Twitter and other things. And for me, there are a few things that are emerging. But first of all, the thing that I really want to acknowledge, I think, is the variety of the program. You know, when I look through the agenda, and when I've dipped in and out of sessions, and when I've attended sessions, and when I facilitated sessions, and when I presented at sessions, the variety has just been huge. And I would like to think that probably we're walking away from a conference where there has been a little bit of something for everybody, whether you're a policymaker, whether you're a classroom teacher, whether you work for an NGO, or whether you're a game designer, in terms of getting insight. I really think that this conference has managed to pull something for everybody as part of the program. And like many conferences as well, I think we can probably put the conference and the program into two categories: one of content, which has been excellent, but also one of community as well. And it's really as part of this insight session that we really want to emphasize that it's really, really important that we continue to build on the M Education Alliance community, and that we continue to have all of these discussions. For me, there have been a number of sort of big themes that have been emerging, not least with the different projects that we've seen around the world and in different countries and in different country contexts, but also the really, really rich debate that I think we've had around the main themes of the conference, which of course has been about play and it's been about technology. So my kind of provocation to start with is really thinking about what we mean by play, and that was started off at the start of the conference by the LEGO Foundation Chair of Learning Through Play, who challenged us to think about play being around 5 characteristics. So playful learning experiences being joyful, meaningful, actively engaging, socially interactive, and also iterative of nature. And we've seen these characteristics, or versions of these characteristics, being mentioned in a whole number of different presentations throughout the conference. They've not always been the same, but it seems to me that many of the presenters have had these high-level conceptual frameworks around what good quality looks like. And I think that term good quality and high quality playful learning experiences is something really, really important that we need to take forward. The other interesting debate that I think we've seen in parallel is actually, what do we mean by technology? And I've been really heartened by a number of the presentations that have taken a broad approach to what we mean by education technology, from no tech to very, very low tech solutions to sort of quite high tech solutions. And some of the best presentations that I've seen are where we've been looking at all 3 of these different approaches, and where you can learn from a no-tech solution, from a high-tech solution, or from a high-tech solution, from a low-tech solution. And the reason that I think that is important, and this came through very, very strongly in one of the presentations I did earlier, is this idea that actually it's not about the tech, it's about the teach. And what's been coming through with all of these programs for me, and all of the really, really good presentations, is it's the pedagogy and the facilitation that's really, really important as well. And I think that when I think about playful learning pedagogies moving forwards, I think a lot about project-based learning and inquiry-based learning and collaborative-based learning, and the children's ability not just to be able to sort of solve problems, but also to find these problems to solve as well. And I think my provocation to the conference would be to think about, as we think about digitizing curriculum, and as we think about increasingly taking different curriculums on time, how do we do this in an active and also really, really playful way? And the reason that I think that this is incredibly important is because during the pandemic and during the height of lockdown in many, many countries, we saw a number of schools and education systems default to a delivery model of education. And actually what we've seen during the M Education Alliance conference is a whole variety of different presenters that have been able to not only showcase playful pedagogies with technology in different projects around the world, but they've also demonstrated how we can use tools like video conferencing tools, how we can use apps, and how we can use other digital technologies to really engage participants, in this case adults, in an actively engaging and a playful way. So I think as we move forward, I guess my main takeaways are we really need to continue to think about what high quality play looks like. We need to really think about the appropriate use of technology in schools, in homes, and in classrooms, and what this looks like. And we need to really focus on the pedagogy, and not just the tools that are being used as well. So how can the technology augment, what goes on in the classroom? So those are kind of my sort of high level takeaways from the conference so far. But I'm just really interested now to kind of open up the conversation to what other people think, and us for just to kind of reflect on some of the other key takeaways from different people, whether it's about specific projects or whether it's about specific tools and services that people have seen.
Thank you, Ollie, for those comments. And I would invite actually those individuals who are observing this, feel free to please request or join us. Ask your question and give us your comment. It would be terrific to see you. You have a button at the top of your screen that allows you access to videos and audio as well. Ollie, I know you had received some of the aha reflections from participants as well, just in terms of particular sessions. You've summed them up. Was there anything else particular that came out in terms of some of those reflections?
Well, I think one recurring reflection, and again, this is from a number of people as well, is that is first of all, I think a real like eye-opening or awakening from some people in the conference, just globally, how much COVID-19 has actually impacted many children around the world and continues to impact children around the world. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that and that we continue to acknowledge that. But another a recurring comment that we see several times as well is just how technology and play and combining technology and play can really help engage more vulnerable learners, whether this is learners with additional support needs or with disabilities, or indeed learners that don't want to engage with the formal education system. There seems to be something quite engaging, about the use of technology and in play to engage young people.
That's great, Ollie. Yeah, in terms of the range of, typically when we organize the symposia, we always have a session, first of all, on disability, which ends up being sort of quite a large in terms of equity, and then starting really from the low resource setting. What was nice about the theme of this year's event as a contrast to, in effect, last year's theme, which was digital literacy, which you can imagine mostly was focused on higher resource access, even though we had pre-computational skills, is the universality of playing games across a variety of contexts, knowing that kids, wherever they are interested in playing games. And our role as educators and adults or administrators is how do we connect that to learning outcomes, both in and outside formal school settings. So were there any other sort of reflections or aha moments people would like to drop in the chat to share with us? What was a key takeaway that you got from the event? Or let us know some individual that you were really excited by in terms of their presentation that you look forward to following up to. We'll just pause for a moment for people to be able to throw that into the chat. Obviously, Ollie, this is different than our having an audience. And so waiting for, so okay, Nicole, feel free to jump on screen. Oh, sorry, Nicole was saying, feel free to jump on screen to give us your reflection as well. All right, Bob, come on in. I may have scared Bob. There he is.
No, you didn't scare me away. I'm here.
Okay, good.
So quick, hi, Ollie. How you doing? My name's Bob Hawkins.
Doing?
I work at the World Bank. We're partners with Tony and the team from the Education Alliance. One of the challenges we have is what you talk about in terms of project-based learning, inquiry-based learning, is critical to be able to kind of develop skills and to be able to engage students, but there's very little space in the curriculum. And with our clients, the curriculum reform and finding that space is really difficult. And I know Finland had kind of started down in, I forget what it's called, inquiry-based curriculum. I'm just wondering if you can share some perspectives on how you've seen successful examples of either education systems, countries in the case of Finland, that have been able to open space in the curriculum for more innovative pedagogies and playful learning.
Yeah, so I'm like super happy to do that. I mean, I think that Finland and the Nordic countries, as we all know, they're often referred to when we talk about these more, I guess, innovative pedagogies. But the challenge, I guess, for replicating that in other parts of the world is the cultural differences between different countries, and that's one of the big challenges that we face. And I think that what we've learned from big global education reform now is that you can't just take one system and retrofit it into another system. The truth of it is that if we want to pivot towards more active pedagogies in our schools, is that something else has to go. But what I wanted to do maybe is just cite a really interesting example of what's going on in South Africa at the moment, where it's been widely acknowledged that we've got that children, as they go back to school in South Africa, are not going back to school in all provinces at the moment, and it's been acknowledged by the Department of Basic Education there that children are going to need to catch up with aspects of their learning. And again, we see that in different countries around the world. But interesting there, the solution to it is making some brave decisions about stripping some content out of the curriculum. And it's actually interesting, it's taken a global pandemic to actually help countries strip some of this content out of the curriculum and replace that with a more skills-focused curriculum, but also thinking about how children can learn via degree of projects, which are currently being built at the moment. The other thing that I would kind of comment on is that when we look at project-based approaches around the world where it's been successful, Denmark is an example of it, New Zealand would be a good example of it, Scotland and Wales around it as well, is that we can't just pivot to project-based learning and active pedagogies overnight. Actually, this needs to be part of a sequence of events. So you actually develop the skills and the techniques and the capacities in both young people and teachers to pivot towards more project-based learning from an early age. And then as the children start to get older, they start to get more autonomy within their learning and start to make more active choices within their learning as well. So these are kind of two big takeaways that we can take. The first one being that governments have to make brave decisions to remove content and to replace that with skills where appropriate. And the second one being is that when we think about curriculum design, then it's actually more about drip feeding these project-based techniques into a children's education as they get older, so that they are able to be autonomous when they get older.
Absolutely. I mean, one space that we see is around the movement towards full-time school models, particularly in Latin America, where kind of the afternoons are kind of more open for project-based learning, which we're trying to look at working with partners, clients to open up that space. But thanks. I'd mentioned to Tony that we're putting together a podcast, so we might reach out to you for a deeper discussion next week. But thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bob, for joining us. Megan, come on screen. Let's see if I was able to get. Oh, perfect. Megan, you've been we can't hear you. So Megan has been a very active chatter during this event. Perfect, Megan.
Okay,
so
my
please introduce yourself.
a little bad, so you can hear me though, right?
Go ahead. Yep.
Because I can't really hear you quite that well. So now that I understand why kids are very reluctant to like come on screen, because my heart beating, I'm nervous. But, this conference has been really great. I'm a play advocate. I'm very involved with playful learning. But just kind of introduce my comment is that I have been a teacher for 20 years. I left teaching recently, but what really was the connection for me, an aha moment, was that I learned about the term constructionism as a pedagogy. And so for me as an educator, a light bulb went off because I was like, that's my camp. Those are my people. So that was really empowering for me. But I think with this conference, what I have had as a takeaway is, how easy it is to implement games and play because it's so much a part of our universal makeup as humans. And kids they light up when you say, okay, we're going to play a game. You can be like, even with high schoolers, okay, we're going to play a game and learn physics. And they instantly become engaged. So I just wanted to share that, because I think that we hear play and we think sometimes as educators, as academics too, oh, that's difficult to implement. Oh, there's too many challenges. There, I'll lose all the pieces if it's a manipulative. There's a lot of blocks, but really play is just, it can be just, low tech with no material. So just a shout out to the people that have organized this conference. It's been really great. And I love that technology has been implemented with the topic as well. So kudos to everyone involved.
Hey, Megan, just a quick question for you.
I'm going to go off screen now because I can't hear.
Okay. Bye-bye. All right, well, thanks. Scott, can you, we can't see you. Oh, there you are, Scott. Thanks. Thanks for joining as well. And Scott, I'm glad you were able to find your way out of the Escape the Symposium, because I figured if there was anyone who could have a torch to let people through it would be you. So I'm glad that you were able to come out the other end. Scott, do you want to share your reflections?
Sure. So I'll share the thing that is actually a great aha for me and something I'm already putting to work. And that was in the last session with Warren introducing us to Fred Rogers and his focus on good. Now, the degree program that I started at my university 6 years ago, we had the slogan of making games that change the world. We've moved away from that slogan in the last few years because there's been a lot of pushback from game scholars about how manipulative games for change can be. And we're seeing that. We're seeing some reflection of the manipulation of social media that was discussed in the last section, that we're seeing this media created for kids being very manipulative. And so we've pulled back from games for change as our slogan. We're working on turning our students into critical designers, understanding the values in their games. But I've been starting to build the case around focusing on games for good. And that idea that we're not trying to push the change out to you. We're coming at making games with a good heart, with good intentions. And the Fred Rogers quote that was shared, try your best to make goodness attractive. That's one of the toughest assignments you'll ever be given. I've now pasted that onto our program's lead page as a quote to follow. Why making games for good is a challenge we want to inspire our undergraduates toward. 70% of video games last year had guns in them. And so some of our rules on games for our students is they can't make any games where you're killing people, no games where you're colonizing people, no games where you're bankrupting people. We're trying to make games for good. And I really appreciated the ahas I got from bringing Fred Rogers. So for me, the biggest take home is going to be spending a lot of time researching about the way Fred Rogers did social justice, the way he looked at games for good, and how he used media and bringing that into the programs we're doing to inspire students to get out there and make games for good.
I think I really welcome that comment, Scott. And I think the thing that I took from the session as well when we were reflecting on Fred Rogers during the last session is just this inherent belief that Fred had around play and creativity being a public good. And that notion of really what he was trying to promote there was applied humanism. And I think if we can strip back to that, and I think if we can focus our efforts in as you're saying there, games for games for good, or really values-based games, at the highest level. I think that's a wonderful provocation that you've given us there, and a wonderful mission to go on.
Scott, and we look forward to working with you and other folks that have participated in this event as we explore that theme. Scott, we had dialogues about our interest in escape games, but ultimately the session before that, it was highlighted that a lot of it begins with a good story, and so you should build a cascade around that. So Scott, that'll be terrific. I know that there's other comments that are in the chat box as well. Again, would like to invite any, if you'd like to include sort of specific aha in the chat, or ask to be invited so we could see you as well. Ollie, so I know that you introduced a resource during your session. If you might want to reference that again in terms of a fairly recent LEGO Foundation publication, if you want to mention that again.
Yeah, so the resource that I mentioned during my presentation was a fairly new research report. It's about 12 months old now, and it's called Learning Through Play in Schools. And that's where we've really looked at the LEGO Foundation 5 characteristics of play, and we've mapped them against existing evidence-based pedagogies. So we've tried to suggest, like during that publication, that there are a number of pedagogies that are more playful in nature, and I've already cited some of those in my opening remarks around kind of project-based learning, inquiry-based learning, and collaborative learning. And a kind of follow-up piece of work that we're doing around that at the moment is thinking about these pedagogies with a digital lens, because I do believe it is possible to do project-based learning well, and collaborative-based learning well, and inquiry-based learning well, through the medium of technology, or indeed, through a blended learning approach as well. And one of the remarks that I think I made during our presentation on our workshop earlier is that some of the best schools in the world who use these active pedagogies really, really well, when we went into a lockdown scenario and children from learning from home, they kind of forgot that actually you can do group work digitally. You can do inquiry-based learning digitally, and you can do project-based learning digitally. And in fact, actually the reasons why we don't sometimes see more project-based learning in schools is because of restrictions of the curriculum that was already mentioned, or because of the timetable. Yet we were in this kind of wonderful, or this really crazy situation over a number of months where there was no timetable in a number of places, and students were either had autonomy or were getting one-to-one support from some kind of adult. Yet there was a lack of instructional provocations from schools around some of these more open-ended, holistic approaches. So a fascinating time for sure.
Great, thank you, Ollie. Surinder, you've also been one of our champion chatters during all the sessions that I've participated in, and really appreciate that. We know that you've joined us. We can't see your video, but can you hear us?
Yes. So there's a problem with my laptop. It doesn't allow my video to come in. It's incredibly slow. So I've signed up on my desktop. So I can hear you. I can see you both, but you can't see me, unfortunately. But I don't know if Ollie knows. So Ollie, I'm from Smart Kids Club. We have a digital library of books that read aloud in English. And we have implemented this platform nationwide in Namibia in association with a sponsor. And we also have this in rural schools in Punjab. We are a for-profit company, and we do sell our subscriptions worldwide. But we see that our app can go offline. And it is seeing a great interest during this pandemic because, kids in rural settings where there's no internet, where there is no electricity, we can have solar power tablets, and our app preloaded onto these tablets and given to these children who have no resources or no libraries to read. And because the books read aloud in English with word highlighting, you don't need the parents to be involved, in hand-holding the kids. Yeah. But my question here is that there are so many differences in the local resources and governments and how they work around the world. How can companies like ours, our job is to just build a resource and have this great resource, but in order to implement it and have this reach the children who really need these resources, what kind of support or collaborations we can have, or what can we do to have this resource in the hands of kids under the age of 10 years?
Thanks, Surinder. Ollie, I'll take a stab as well, but if you want to reply to that first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard, isn't it? Like it's always going to be hard, particularly in remote areas or particularly in economically disadvantaged areas. One of the things that I think, one of the more positive things that I think is coming out of the pandemic is that a number of governments have realised that the poverty-related attainment gap has got bigger, and it's been exaggerated as a result of COVID-19, and as a result of that, in many parts of the world, we are seeing a pivot towards supporting and thinking about other ways to support more underprivileged and low-income families and communities. I think that the challenge that we face with a lot of products and services like your own that are obviously seen to have impact is that we just need to make sure that we've got a really strong evidence base for them going forward, so that in terms of what you're saying that the product and the service can do is actually doing that in terms of not just motivating children for read, but is actually having a benefit on literacy rates. And then I think it's a case then of, once we've got that evidence base, is to making sure that we're advocating and communicating that these tools and services are having an impact, and then it's doing our best to try and put these tools and services in the hands of policymakers and other people and local enterprise and community groups that might be able to help support and roll out some of these technologies and platforms into into schools. It also strikes me, and it was interesting to read one of the recent reports that are coming from Brookings around this, is that in terms of large scale technology rollouts, which we increasingly see around the world, it's really important that we get appropriate software and services on computers and laptops and tablets or whatever the device is, as they leave the factory, and rather than trying to install software like afterwards as well. Like the impact of good software builds as things get pushed out would seem to be incredibly important, particularly for more rural areas with lack of connectivity or lack of funding.